Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is fear and control, and how we often try to relieve ourselves of our fear by control or attempts at control. Anyway, before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, your organs, and bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, all your electrons, creating this brilliant beam of light from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's gently press our palms together. Very softly rub your fingers against your palms to truly feel that sensation. Allow yourselves to become present to that sensation. And from there, to be in wonder about these remarkable physical forms that enable us to experience life. Welcome. Good morning, Rosalind. Good morning. Great to have you here with us. And welcome to everybody else who's here with us this morning. We're talking about fear and control. And I think fear is the feeling of being out of control, right? In so many ways, we're afraid that something outside of us, or maybe even something inside of us, is outside of our ability to control or contain. Or so when we think about the unknown, many folks are really afraid of the unknown, right? The truth is that we're constantly living in the unknown. We just create this illusion of continuity for ourselves. But the truth is that in any given moment, pretty much anything could happen. We just don't live that way. We live more in a world of probability and trying to create continuity, which is a way for us to control our fear of the unknown, right? We assume that certain things are going to happen. The interesting thing is that we often create projections about the future to allay our fears. And it's not just about the future. Good morning, Isabel. Welcome. It's great to have you here with us. We're talking about fear and control, and how a pretty standard response to fear is to try to exercise some modicum of control. So when we're facing an uncertain future, oftentimes a lot of people resort to pretty intense planning and strategizing and determining ways to minimize risk, minimize damage, and create. I'm not saying that we shouldn't plan or be cognizant of preparing for the future. The thing is that there are occasions where, regardless of how well we plan, life doesn't go, pretty much usually life doesn't go the way we expected, right? And so, for instance, I've known of people who have been very diligent in financially planning for their futures, and then all of a sudden there's a massive disruption of the financial sector, and their savings disappear. Or people who think that they are being wise in their investments, put their trust in the wrong people, and all of their savings disappear. So it's not through lack of planning or trying to control this uncertain future, but the thing that I'm saying is that we can't predict. And likewise, we can't predict. Good morning, Kimberly. So good to have you here with us this morning. We're talking about fear and control. Likewise, we can't predict when we're going to have a windfall, or when something completely, some gift will fall from the sky, essentially completely unpredicted. So I think it is interesting to be looking at how fear drives us in our attempts to make our lives more predictable. So where this conversation is coming from is that I was speaking with a friend and client who is very strategic and works with very strategic in business and in finance and in life, really. And remarkable person who is working to cultivate a new paradigm for work, essentially. And this is a really, let's see. So Isabel says, so we're talking about our society's regime, right? Fear and control. You got it. Isabel, you're funny. You took me down a path I didn't expect to go. And I'm going to go back to where I was headed before for the moment. So anyway, we were talking about paradigms of business. And if we look at paradigms of business, that is kind of one of our society's regimes, right? Is fear and control, where we may be in fear of losing our job. And we're in a situation where we have to maintain control of ourselves in order to fulfill the expectations and even the social expectations within certain paradigms, right? So this thing about fear and control, it is largely fear of, whether we'll be taken care of, fear of the existence, or fear that the existence of the abundance of the universe isn't really there. When we are afraid of lack, what happens is we try to be in greater control of our finances and of our future. And we think about, there's so much fear really around money or lack of money, right? Fear is a state of kind of a place of lack, it's like lacking safety, lacking connection, lacking flow, lacking trust, right? So Isabel says this, I'm gonna, okay. So this recent plague, I'm going to translate for you, Isabel, woke me up about which societies we live in, no matter where we turn to. I think that we've lived in a whole situation of fear and control for the past couple of years, right? Fear that we would be exposed to and come down with a deadly disease. And that fear propagated into all kinds of control measures, right? Where fear was even accelerated and expanded, to be afraid of each other, to be afraid of congregating socially, to be afraid of all kinds of things. And so we implemented all these actions to try and control the situation. But what happened was that exercise of control actually generated even more fear. And so maybe there's a fear control spiral. The more we're afraid, the more we try to control things. The more we see that we can't control things, the more we try to control things, the more fearful we become. So it's an interesting kind of dynamic when we look at this whole thing. So Isabel says, now about what you're meaning, yes, where we have fear, we tend to be in fear and reaction mode. Exactly. So what is fear essentially is feeling out of control, I think. Feeling at the effect of forces that we can't moderate, or that we can't, well, just feeling at the effect, let's say that. So we could feel victimized, or we could feel afraid, or we could feel all those things. But I think it's really interesting. So the question is, how do we address that? How do we address this state of fear in a more productive way than trying to exert control? Because really control's an illusion anyway. Just like a fear, I've heard the acronym false, what is it? False, oh my gosh, now I'm not remembering. Something false, something appearing real. What's the E stand for in fear? I know you guys know. Anyway, so Isabel says fear is a stage or easy manipulation in school, home, family, job, etc. Yes, like fear is often a vehicle of domination, right? And the response to an attempt to dominate is to try to either avoid, but oftentimes it's to try to control. So there's this backlash that comes from that sort of domination. We've so been schooled into a hierarchy of false evidence. Thank you so much, Rosalind. I knew somebody knew. Okay, so fear, false evidence appearing real. And so it's all about our interpretations. Rosalind says, maybe it's helpful to categorize where the fear is coming from and how we play a role by imposing limits on ourselves. Beautiful. 1, fear of missing out. 2, lack. 3, loss. Yes, or also injury, physical injury is another element that can generate fear. I'm thinking about, well, how do we combat fear? So one way that we can combat fear is by cultivating curiosity. So to be doing more research, to be learning more about something, because people fear the unfamiliar, right? So we can even be looking at this in terms of other societies, other cultures. When we talk about immigrants right now, with the wave of immigrants from in Europe, right? when we think of when we think of other people, when we learn more about different cultures, we become less fearful, right? Knowledge can be a helpful foil in releasing our fear, curiosity, openness, because fear is kind of a shutdown, right? And what if we can find a way to create an opening, we can open our perception as well, because fear is a shutdown of our perception as well, literally. And if we can find a way to be more open, then the fear dissipates. So Rosalind says, combat fear, intentional triggering. What's the worst of the fearful thing happening? And then seeing ourselves on the other side as if the desired outcome is already here. So that's absolutely one way to combat fear, which is facing it, right? Like saying, well, what is this fear? What is the essence of it? What is underlying it? What's triggering it? And to be curious about that, and then also to be feeling it and imagining. I've heard of people doing this. For instance, what is the worst case scenario? Prepare for the expect the worst, prepare for the best. This is not my philosophy, but I know a lot of people live by that. And to say, okay, what's the worst and how could I contend with that? That's kind of like a little bit of the illusion of control, is to be making plans, putting all these plans in place so that I'm controlling the situation. And so back to the original topic, putting savings in place in a certain way, for instance, to prepare for retirement, for example. And I know too many people. I'm not advising against that. I'm just saying that I know too many people who have had unexpected turns of fortune when they had been being responsible, what we call responsible, that's in air quotes, who had been being responsible, who had planned and ferreted funds away, and then the winds of change just came in and swept things away. So I think it's interesting what you're saying about intentional triggering, Rosalind, because one of the ways that we can, I don't know about immunize, but reduce our experience of fear is by kind of inoculating ourselves with the situation, by desensitizing ourselves to it, because we just repeat it over and over again until the fear dissipates. That's something that could work. And in fact, I know it has worked for a number of people in all kinds of different situations. My thinking is that rather than combating fear, because that's creating the resistance to it, maybe what we get to do is to cultivate a deeper trust, a deeper sense of flow, because fear is resistance, right? And it's so interesting to me to see how much attention people put to we're talking about fear and worry at the same time. So worry is a form of fear. okay, or projected fear. So with worry, it's a matter of conceptualizing a possible outcome that's not necessarily too delightful, projecting it forward, and then creating a strategy to interact with that thing that we've projected forward, right? So I'm trying to control the situation so that then I don't have to be fearful. I have this idea, I'm projecting it forward. I'm thinking about how all this dark stuff is going to happen. So then I put things in place in the future or in my plan for the future to prevent that circumstance that I created in my mind and projected forward in the first place. And it's kind of fascinating that we do this, right? All that energy. Whereas when we are responsive, if we're present and we're able to respond to the moment and to the calling of the moment, the inspiration, guidance that is available to us when we're able to be present, then we take appropriate action. I'm not saying don't take action. I'm not saying don't have savings. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying that as we're tuned in and are able to cultivate a deeper sense of connection and trust and flow, that the fear resolves. The fear is no longer the driving factor. And I think that there's a very different thing, a different sense of creating a savings account from a place of inspiration versus from a place of fear. It's the difference between cultivating trust and trying to control fear. It's a big difference. When we're trying to control fear, what are we doing? We're reinforcing the fear just by virtue of the action. So Isabel says, going within and nourishing and loving ourselves and go in higher vibration, then it's easier relative to everything. Exactly. That cultivating trust is very different than fighting fear. And it's a higher vibration, right? And the thing is that we don't have the bigger perspective of things to say, okay, well, this event was bad and this thing was good. And, you know, we don't have the perspective to be able to say, that even the cataclysms in our lives were not ultimately for our benefit. Most often they tend to be, you know, if we can allow ourselves to utilize them in that way. So Isabel says situations and things only have the importance that we give them. Exactly. And the interpretation that we give them. So if we're relating to something and saying, wow, that's bad, or that's scary, then what kind of reaction are we going to have to that? We're going to try to contain it in some way or another, potentially, right? Rather than finding a way. And what is that? That containment is contractive, right? Rather than finding a way to be expansive in the face of it, where we might recognize possibilities that we hadn't even previously conceptualized, that we hadn't even previously imagined. So if we can take these opportunities, take these moments of fear as opportunities and approach them with curiosity, that's already creating an openness, and then start looking for the opportunity, like what's available to me that I wasn't seeing. You know, what might be another way to be integrating or interacting with or interpreting a situation, right? So I think it's so interesting when, well, first of all, I think we teach what we are committed to learning, like like our passion, the thing that we're fascinated about or that we're drawn to is something that we teach so that we can gain a deeper understanding of those things, um, because of our fascination. So we dig more and more deeply as teachers, we dig more and more deeply into things to be able to get that rich connection and understanding about something. So it was fascinating to me to take on creating something like a new paradigm of work is a really, really big deal, right? We don't realize how deeply entrenched we are in our existing paradigms. It's like the fish in water, right? We don't even see the assumptions that we make until we make a career of it, not necessarily a career, but until we make a passion of it. And anyway, so Rosalind says we tend to overgeneralize. So being present to what is true. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Present to what is being experienced at the present moment. Yes, discern fact from opinion. Hard to do that. Hard to do that. 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, and 1 thing you taste. I forgot what 2 was. This is brilliant. Where's that from, Rosalind? I love that. I've never heard of it. Makes really good sense if you're in a mode where you're spiraling out somehow in your mind, or maybe just wanting to get more present. We tend to overgeneralize. So being present to what is true, present to what is being experienced at the moment, discern fact from opinion. 5 things you see, 4 things you feel, 3 things you hear, maybe 2 things you smell, perhaps, and 1 thing you taste. Very fascinating. I love that. What a great practice that is. I love that. So on that note, that we're going to wrap it up for this morning. But look at when you're controlling. We were looking at the fear leading to control, but we didn't really discuss the underlying fear that drives control. And so if you notice that you're trying to control something, or other people are trying to control something, look at what the underlying fear might be. And then maybe you can address that fear to release that whole dynamic as well. Anyway, that's it for this morning. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here with me. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern. And please check out the other awesome programming from Enlightened World Network on Enlightened World Living, EWN One with the Earth, and of course, Enlightened World Network. And until next time, so much love to you and deep appreciation. I look forward to seeing you again here really, really soon.